Welcome to the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, let's get into our third Chazara shiur of volume number 18. Third and final, we had a Chazara shiur relating to the issues of Bishul Daraisa. We had a shiur about the issues of Bishul Drabanan, Shehiyah HaChazara and Atmana. And now the last two shiurim here in volume 18, the volume of the Yakir Hexter and David Schwartz, Acharnim Levracha volume, sponsor Lili Nashmasam, shiur 6 and 7 is the halachas of Dash and the first part of Borer. Borer is going to take us at least another shiur in the next volume, volume 19, Be'ezras Hashem. But first we have one shiur on Dash we had, and then we had one shiur on Borer. So to review those again, just going through the Rashi Prakim. The Melacha of Dash is early on in the Sidur the Pas, as we saw on page 253. Those who are following the review, Dash is the extraction of something inside that is covered, that is embedded, that is absorbed. We'll see, squeezing out fruit, taking a nut out of its shell. All of those are in the Melacha of Dash. That's the Menochas Ava says, Hotzas min echad balua umechuse betoch min acher mitocho. By squeezing, by pushing, by picking. All of those, that is the Melacha of Dash. As in the Mishkan, it was the on the kernels that are inside the chaff. This, detaching the chaff from the branch and taking the kernel out, that is the Melacha of Dash. The Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Ayin Gimel, in source number 3, discusses somebody who takes a clod of earth and throws it up at the top of a palm tree, and the dates scatter. So that could be, explains the Gemara, that could be the Melacha of Dash according to one opinion. The other opinion says it's not the normal way to do the Melacha of Dash. But when the dates or whatever's growing up there comes off of the tree and then it hits the ground and the bottom and the shell falls out and what's inside comes out, so that could be the Melacha of Dash if it wasn't done in unusual way. So that's the Melacha of Dash. Where does this come up? One of the major applications of Dash is squeezing out fruit on Shabbos. And the Isser thereof. The Mishnah says in Shabbos in the beginning of the 22nd parak, source number 7, Ein sochlim es haperos, one is not allowed to squeeze fruit. Lahotzi mehen mashkin, you can't squeeze fruit. Schita is in the Melacha of Dash. We mentioned then that really schita, there are two types of schita within two different melachas. There's schita of libun, the schita of washing, and that is when I'm using a clear liquid and I'm doing it as part of the cleansing process. We mentioned that the washing machine cycles. Each one of those cycles is in the Melacha of libun. We'll have to get to that when we talk about the Melacha of libun. But the schita of libun and the schita of dash, right? The Rishonim point out. So now we're talking about the schita of dash, where I want to get out. I'm squeezing to get out what is inside. So if I squeeze a fruit on Shabbos, that's a problem. Says the Mishnah, what if the juice oozed out by itself? I have some fruit in a bowl, and all of a sudden it got mushy and the liquid squeezed out. So says the Mishnah, if it came out by itself, it's aser. That's also aser. Why? Gzeira, if I'm able to enjoy this juice, I might come to squeeze. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, it depends. Rabbi Yehuda says, Imla Ochlin, if the fruit that you have were meant for eating, you had no plans to squeeze it, so then you're allowed to drink what got squeezed out. But Imla Mashkin, if you were planning to squeeze them, and now you're allowed to drink what got squeezed out, so that's a problem. So it's machlokas between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda. But the Gemara then says there are really 3 categories of fruit. The Gemara says they are Kuf Mem Gimel Beis. Mo de Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda agrees to the Chachamim Bezeisim va'anavim. Olives and grapes are the category 1 type of fruit. Those are the D'oraisa type of fruit. If I squeeze olives and grapes on Shabbos, that's also D'oraisa. Why? Because they're the most commonly squeezed, or maybe they're the only fruit that produce a halachically recognized liquid, oil and wine, right? They're in a special category. So Rabbi Yehuda agrees to by Zeisav Anavim, whatever gets squeezed out by itself, you can't drink. Because Gzeri, you might come to squeeze those fruit, and that would be an Issa Daraisa. And the Chacham agreed to Rabbi Yehuda by Shar Peros, by low-level Peros, as we'll see, that are never squeezed out. then everybody agrees it's mutter. Everybody agrees it's mutter. What got squeezed out? The Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Yehuda. If you weren't planning to squeeze them, then whatever got squeezed out is mutter. The machlokes is by the middle category was called tutim v'rimonim, what we would call berries and pomegranates, because those aren't in the category of zesim v'anavim, but they are in the but also not in the category of sharperos. They're sometimes squeezed out, sometimes. So those are the three categories. In the machlokes, Rabbi Yehuda Chachamim, so by that middle category. The Shulchan Aruch in Shin Chaf paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. Right, zeisim v'anavim, by olives and grapes, you're not allowed to squeeze them out. That it's a daraisa, and whatever comes out from them by itself is usher. Even if you were planning to eat the grapes, you're planning to eat the grapes. But if grapes ooze out some grape juice from the grapes, it's still going to be usher to drink. Tutim v'rimonim, you're not allowed to squeeze them. What about what got squeezed out from them by itself? That depends. That's Rabbi Yehuda. If you were planning to eat them, then you could drink it. If you were planning to squeeze them, then you're not allowed to. But shar kalaperos, if you have something that's never ever squeezed, you're even allowed to squeeze them, because that liquid that comes out, it doesn't have the status of juice. Says the Rama, ubemakom shenago lischod eza peros. If any place there's a minhag to people squeeze out these fruit, they're called tutim v'rimonim. They're called tutim v'rimonim. There is a machlokas. Does that mean in this place it's the custom to squeeze it out, or in any place in the world it's the custom to squeeze it out? The Mishnah Berurah seems to say in that place. The Mishnah Berurah in source number 13, mashma de ba'oso makom aser ubishar makom moshari. But if you take it to a place that in derech laholich hamashka shal peres b'yakam makom, if something gets exported and it gets to everywhere, then it's usher everywhere. But the Magen Avram is marich and says if anywhere in the world they squeeze it, then it's usher everywhere. Generally, bisman hazeh, almost all fruits and even vegetables, you can get carrot juice, you can get celery juice. Almost all fruits and vegetables are squeezed out, and therefore it would be hard pressed to find something, I don't know, maybe a cantaloupe, that would be in the third category that you would even be allowed to squeeze. Because if you're squeezing it, mistama, they also squeeze it somewhere in the world as well. So these are the categories of fruit, and therefore one is not allowed to squeeze a fruit on Shabbos, even if it's derabanan type of fruit, what's called tutim v'rimonim. There is a question that we discussed about grapefruit. So grapefruits, you're allowed to eat a grapefruit on Shabbos. Is there any issue with eating a grapefruit? No, you eat a grapefruit. If something comes out, you're not focused on it. But let's say sometimes towards the end of the grapefruit, you squeeze the side in order to get some extra juice out from the side. That's squeezing a grapefruit on Shabbos. That would be a problem. That is dafka my kavanah. If I'm just eating it and it's a psik ratio, we might call that it's automatically going to come out as I eat it. But that's what we discussed this way back when. It's a psik ratio by a double derabanan. Squeezing a grapefruit is an issa derabanan itself. Doing it in an unusual way with a spoon is an issa derabanan. So psik ratio, if it's not my kavanah to squeeze out the juice, psik ratio by a double derabanan, that would be okay. But if I dafka want to, I take my spoon and I push it against the rind, the side of the grapefruit. So then that would be an issue. The poskim discuss the Beis Yosef already discusses, are lemons different? Are lemons unique? The Beis Yosef discusses in source number 15. Remember, all fruit are discussed, but then the Beis Yosef wonders why in Mitzrayim they squeeze lemons on Shabbos. And he wonders, they squeeze lemons into water, and they put sugar in there also. They do it on Shabbos. So why is that? The Efshar says the Beis Yosef maybe delo mitzar ela kishosin meischitas apuri below tarovis mashka acher. Maybe it's only usher if you're going to drink it separately. But here they're drinking it with the water. They're not going to drink it in an undiluted fashion. Inami or delo mitzar, it's only usher if you're going to squeeze it alone and then mix in the water. But if you're going to squeeze it directly and then it's mutter. Either way, the Beis Yosef gives these heterim, and therefore the Beis Yosef paskins 3 words in the Shulchan Aruch, mutter lischod lemons. That's what he says. The poskim generally, most of them do not assume this bisman hazeh. The Mishnah Berurah writes, bisman hazeh, no. Bisman hazeh, we drink lemon juice. Bisman hazeh, we squeeze lemons into barrels by itself without any water. He says, memalin chavis lameos, lishtos. So he says, sarach iyon, and therefore most assume the Shmir Shabbos says, lemons are no different than any other fruit. Lemons are no different than any other fruit. You're not allowed to squeeze it. Asr lischo, says the Shmir Shabbos in source number 18. Asr lischo, lemon, o tapuz, litokli, an orange. Gamim daitu lishpoch as a mitz, ala ochlan. Even if you're going to pour it onto food in a minute, which we'll get to that heter, that is not allowed if it's done into an empty kli. The kol aliyah also, that's generally what we assume. Rav Avadia has a kula. He thinks maybe you could go back to the Meikar Adin of the Shulchan Aruch, Meikar Adin, but he says lamaisa, it's good to be machmir. So on the one hand, the Rav Avadia is meiko. The Chazon Ish is on the other side, and he's very machmir. The Chazon Ish says even if the way that the Mishnah Berurah and others say that, as we're going to learn, squeezing onto a solid is going to be okay. So you take your lemon, you squeeze it onto a cube of sugar, and then you put the sugar into the tea. That would be okay. The Chazon Ish says that's not true. That's not called squeezing it onto a solid, because you're about to put that sugar into the tea, which is going to dissolve in the tea. So that's not called into a solid. The Chazon Ish says in source 22, Im daito lasesas asukar l'toch hamayim nire deschita zu asura. This is usher. The kivan shadaito lamashke chashav mashke. It's already considered mashke into mashke. Kishayotze kodem shnevla besukar, and therefore he's machmer. But generally, we assume the middle approach. Not to squeeze lemons are not more mako than any other fruit, but they're not more machmer, and the sugar would be okay. That's what Rav Moshe says also, and he also talks about eating grapefruit, as I said before. What about schita? If I just have a wedge of an orange, can't squeeze an orange on Shabbos. But what if sometimes children they don't like the flesh of the orange? So what do? Or the pulp? So they'll put a wedge of an orange in their mouth and then suck in and get all the juice out and then take it out. Is that okay? Is that squeezing? That's squeezing a liquid. So the Ramah quotes it's mutter to do that even with grapes. The Ramah says even with grapes, mutter limsots befiv min ha'anavim. Hamashke shebahen, v'kol shekein b'shar dvarim. And then he says, v'yesh osrim limsos b'pei me'anavim. Quotes 2 days. The Mishnah Berurah says, maybe by grapes you should be machmir. Because grapes is the Issa Daraisa, as we said, different than or the tutum b'rimonin category. So maybe it's an issue. But it's only an issue if I have the grape outside my mouth that I suck in. If I put the grape totally inside my mouth, says the Mishnah Berurah, then for sure it's mutter. And I just take out the peel, I take out the seed, that's for sure mutter. Mesimam l'toch piv umotit hamashke l'kuliyama derech machalhu, that is for sure mutter. Because you can't, we mentioned then, you can't do a melacha in your mouth. There's no melacha of tochen by grinding in your mouth. There's no melacha of borer in your mouth. There's no melacha of lush, of adding liquid into a salad in the mouth. So too here, there's no melacha of dash in the mouth, so if it's in the mouth, for sure it's mutter. The only issue is if it's next to the mouth and you're squeezing out, so that's where maybe grapes one should be machmir. Good. So what about cutting fruit? That's what we mentioned. Cutting fruit on Shabbos. So if I cut an orange on Shabbos, am I allowed to do that? Yeah, that's mutter. My kavana is not to, because some of the juice might get squeezed down onto the plate. It's okay. That's not my kavana, and I'm squeezing an orange is an issa d'Rabbanan, and squeezing it by cutting it is another unusual way. That's a double d'Rabbanan, and therefore it's allowed. If I'm cutting grapes, Rav Ribiat points this out, if I'm cutting grapes for a child, and I know it could be that liquid's going to come out, but cutting grapes is a daraisa, so it's psik ratio with only one d'Rabbanan. So doing it in an unusual way. So maybe if I know if I'm not sure if the grape is gonna, sometimes liquid doesn't come out. It's a nice hard firm grape. So then it's a darshan miskavin, it's mutter. But if I know it's a mushy grape and liquid's gonna come out, so then maybe you could put a napkin underneath, so it gets absorbed to the napkin right away, and it never gets the status of liquid. Okay, but there's a heter in all this that the Gemara mentions. I'm not allowed to squeeze fruit on Shabbos, but Shmuel tells us, Rav Yehuda Shmuel tells us in Shabbos Kuf Mem Dalet on page 267 that you're allowed to squeeze a whole eshkol shel anavim into a pot, just not into a ka'ara, not into a kedera, not ka'ara. What's the difference between kedera and ka'ara? Kedera is full. You're allowed to squeeze liquid onto solid. Why? Because then it never gets the status of a liquid. Dush is removing liquid, the inside, but here it never gets to the status. It was an ochel before, it's an ochel afterwards. And therefore, that's called the heter of sochet al ha'ochlin, squeezing lemon onto fish. That would be mutter, because it's there to make the fish better, and it's absorbed into the fish, and that's what we paskin. There is a Rabbeinu Hananel who interprets the Gemara differently, or says another Gemara that argues. So this heter is quoted in the Shulchan Aruch, but some poskim say maybe l'chadchila, if you don't have to do this, to rely on Rabbeinu Hananel. to be machmer like Rabbi Hananel. But Me'ikra din is mutter. Shulchan Aruch says mutter lischod eshkol anavim l'tok kedera sheish batav shel kedei l'takin ochel. In order to be misakin the ochel, that's an important condition, as we'll see. And that's what we mentioned before about the lemon onto the sugar cube. But if it's into liquid, it's no good. If it's into empty, it's no good. And that's what the Shmir Shabbos says, like the Shulchan Aruch, maybe to be machmer like Rabbi Hananel for grapes. We don't usually squeeze so many grapes on Shabbos, but maybe for Rabbi Hananel for grapes, because after all, that's the daraisa. V'din zeh sharmanu ki muter lischod es apri miyad l'tocha ochel nomer lagabe kol ha'peir, says the Shmir Shabbos, ela sheba novim ratzui shlo lischod b'Shabbos gam ba'ofan zeh. Maybe it's better not. Maybe it's better not to. The Biur Halacha notes also, like we said, it's only onto solid food, but not onto to liquid. The language of the heter was l'sakin ha'ochel. What if I'm going to squeeze a lemon, I'm going to put a little cookie on the bottom of the bowl, and I'm going to squeeze 10 different lemons onto the cookie. That doesn't work. You need one of two things. You need either it needs to be absorbed into the solid on the bottom, or it's there to be misakein. Let's say you squeeze a lemon onto salad. So it might not be, you might see the lemon juice on top of the vegetables, but it's there for the taste, it's there to be misakein. Right? So therefore that's why it would be allowed. But if it's just a game, like putting the cookie on the bottom, so that would not be allowed, as we'll see soon in the next topic, which is milking cows. Milking cows. We related also a little bit derech agav brushing teeth. One of the issues of brushing teeth on Shabbos is the toothbrush. There's the toothpaste and the toothbrush. So some poskim, Rav Moshe Feinstein is machmer that the toothbrush is like when you brush, the liquid is going to come out. Even any type of water in the toothbrush, Rav Moshe is machmer for, because it's as if it's trapped inside the bristles, then it comes out. So Rav Moshe is the most machmer in terms of teeth brushing. Other poskim are more makel in terms of liquid toothpaste. But in terms of milking cows, so the Gemara says in Shabbos Sadi Hey, milking a cow on Shabbos is an isur d'oraisa. Cholev is asur mishum mafarik for dash. I'm removing the milk from inside the udder of the cow. But like other isurim, one is allowed to ask a guy to do this in a case of blank. What's blank? Litzarach chole, litzarach rabim, or litzarach tzara balachayim. The animal is going to be in pain by not being milked, and therefore you can ask. The Shulchan Aruch says, Mutter Lomar 36, Mutter Lomar Le'ani Yehudi Lachlov Behemto b'Shabbos. You can ask him because of Tsar Balechayim. The chalav is mitzaer, and the chalav is aser. You can't use that chalav that day, but one is allowed to do that. The Shulchan Aruch discusses what happens if you put a little piece of bread in the bottom of the pail, and then all the milk goes on there. So again, that's a joke, as we said. Right, the heter of a bala ochel is only where A, it gets absorbed, or B, it's there for the good of what's on the bottom. But if you're just putting it there as a trick, so then the Shulchan Aruch Harav says that doesn't work. Hacholev chalav harbe l'toch kli sheishbo ma'at lechem ava mishemat chalav nivla. Even though it's a little absorbed, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. And then for the Shmir Shabbos discusses the hardships of the halachic milk dairy industry, again in the days of old. Now there's many more heterim. There's many grama ways that one could set up. You press a button and things don't happen and the cows go in by themselves. But again, Rav Kook was also very strongly, if one could get a non-Jew to do it, if it's safe enough to get a non-Jew, then great. If not, then you got to find some other way to go about it. We discussed also then about a woman expressing milk. A woman, especially after she just has a baby, she has a lot of milk, and if she doesn't express that milk, it's very painful. So there has to be a way to set up. So you could put a breast pump on a timer or a manual one, and then when she nurses, but the shiloh is when she nurses, so that has to be if that would be okay. So she's nursing, but the if to use that milk could be an issue. So they talk about also another heter of holech le'ibud. If you put a little soap in the bottom, so then that's also an allowance, right? If she's in pain, she's allowed to do that just to make sure that it's holech le'ibud. One more topic related to this squeezing out liquid from a solid we discussed at the end, the last piece on page 274 and on, and that is what about squeezing out a liquid that's its natural habitat is not where it is now. You have it's Shabbos Chanukah, and you want to squeeze out some of the oil. I'm going to pick a napkin, and I'm going to push it down on the latke so that some of the oil comes out. So is that an issue of schita? I'm squeezing out the oil. That's called kfashim and shlakos, a pickled or have a very cooked vegetable. So all of that lamaisa, we paskin is mutter. We paskin is mutter. Why? Because you're not doing it to get the liquid out. You're doing it for what's called legufan. You don't want to have so much oil in here, and it's not a real connection between the liquid and that. It's not really liquid juice, right? It's part of the kugel. It's part of the latka, and therefore, generally, we assume that it is mutter if it's being done legufan, not doing it for that liquid. Adkan dush, and then we had our first year on borer. Borer, one of the most scary malachas, as we said, but on the other hand, one of the malachas that basically you could almost do everything you want. You just got to know how to do it. Right? Unlike most malachas where you can't cook and you can't clean and you can't plow and you can't seed and you can't trap. All those things. But you can separate. You just got to know how to separate in the mutter way. And as we know, the borer, the three conditions is one amud in Masechah Shabbos, Daf Ayin Daled. One amud tells us all the conditions. In the Gemara, they're not all quoted lamaskana, but the poskim hold they are all lamaskana. And that, of course, is the three conditions known as ochel, yad, and la'alter. Ochel, taking the food, taking what we call the good from the bad, and miyad, doing it for immediate consumption, also called la'alter, and biyad, not using a separating instrument, but using one's hands or an extension of the hand. The Rambam quotes all those three, right, in Hilchot Shabbos, in source number 4, right, harbora ochel mitop solas. If somebody's bora ochel mitop solas, o shaylevan of shneimini ochel and bir mimim and acher, right, vim birer biyado lechol alter mutter, biyado lechol alter mutter. The Rambam says, right, that's the three conditions. So we spoke about each of the three conditions in our in this first year. Number one, miyad. What does miyad mean? How miyad is miyad? So we mentioned it's not mamish 10 seconds. Rabbeinu Hananel says, ula alter, source number 6. On page 295, Da'amar Abaya calls manche yoshiv al shulchan v'ochel, as long as you're eating, meaning right before the meal. Right before the meal. There's no specific time. The Ramah says, V'kol ma shebor l'tzarach osa suda shemesiba miyad mikri la'alter. Takes you half an hour before the meal, so that's miyad, and that's okay as long as you don't have a break in between. Ritzon Alomar, says the Mishnah Berurah, afilu yarech zman hasuda kama shos. Even if it's a couple hours, you could prepare for dessert during borer, right, before the meal. Because the dessert is part of the meal. As long as it's l'sarach hasuda. And Ramosha says there is no objective amount of time. Ramosha writes in that Shuvah, in source number 9, Ein sha'a zu shal shir sha'a, ela hazman shahaderechu li'isha zu shemisaderes ha'ochlan l'suda. However much time she needs. She can't do it and then go to shul. And then I have to eat right after shul, so I'm going to do it now before I go to shul. No, that's a break. That's not miyad. Certain things you have to do right before the meal, after you come home from shul. But as long as it is done continuously beforehand, that is okay. Good. The Shmir Shabbos says, let's say there's a helper in the house, somebody helping. So if she has other work to do, so then she can't have a break in between. You can't trick, but as long as it's right before the meal, that's good. That is called miyad. How much? What if you could need to prepare something? You could do it right before, but if you let it, let's say, be cut or prepared beforehand and let it be in a bag with the juice or the sauce, it tastes better. And you have to do it 2 hours before. So the Shmir Shabbos quotes from Shlomo Zalman, that's also called miyad. Because miyad, this is what the meal needs. The mistaver shim l'tama tov shel atavshil tzarach shiu habitzalim munachim bozman rav. You have to have the onions sautéing in the sauce a long time. The yeshlomer the chashav ala alter v'shari. It's mutter. That's also called miyad. That's one heter. Also, interesting. The Shuvas Rav Palam, the Ben Ish Chai says, what if I know people aren't going to eat all this, but it's nice to have a full plate when you give the guests. Oh, there are 6 guests, I'm going to put out 6 pieces. No. It's nice to have leftovers. People don't think they're taking the last one. So am I allowed to prepare food, even though I know it's not going to be eaten? It's a tzorech of miyad, but it's not going to be consumed right now? That's also mutter, says the Rav Pa'olim. The Gamazeh, that's part of the tzorech hasuda. Or other poskim say, what if I know they're not going to eat it now, but I want to give them seder laderech? So I'm going to prepare it now because they're going to leave soon, right after the meal. That's also allowed. Rav Avadia is not so convinced. He doesn't know what the rayas are of the Ben Ish Chai about why that should be a need to be able to put extra on the tables. They feel good, but the minhag is lahakel that as long as this is the way you usually serve a meal, that is called miyad. Number one. Number two, the other heter is biyad. Biyad. In this year we laid down the Yisodos, and in the next year I think we're going to have many of the applications. So biyad, the hand. So if I use my hand, it's mutter. What if I use a spoon? What if I use a spoon? That's not a separating instrument, is it? Or is that an extension of my hand? So that seems to be a stira, two Mishnah Bruras, whether a spoon is considered a separating instrument, but the Pashup Pshat is, where Moshe writes in source 19, it depends why you're using the spoon. If you're using the spoon to separate as a separating instrument, so then that's a problem. But if you're using it because you don't want to get your hands dirty, you're just using it as an extension of your fingers, so then it's not a problem. Then it's not called a separating instrument. That's what the Mishnah Moshe writes in source 19, page 301. Because I use the fork, it's easier. That's a problem. But if I'm not doing it for the borer, I just want to get my hands dirty, so then it is okay. That's what Moshe says. The Aruch HaShabbos assumes maybe the difference is what part of the process it is. If it's right before you eat it, that's called eating. It's not in the food production. It's in the food consumption. Maybe it depends when it's being done. Okay, what else did we talk about? The Rav Shlomo Zalman has another heter. Shlomo Zalman says any kli that you only use for borer right before you consume, that's not called a kli borer. Not called a kli borer, even if it looks like a kli. Ramosha explains this, a tea bag. We'll see some posts going to say, a tea bag is a kli borer, because when you pull out the string and then the water goes out of the bag, we already spoke about bishul, but let's say forget the bishul, it's using a kli shlishi and you rely on that, so the liquid goes out of the tea bag as you pick it up. So isn't that a kli borer? You're separating and taking the bad from the good. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman, no, but a tea bag, you always use that right before you're going to consume. So that's not a true kli borer. That's what the Shmir Shabbos says in source 22. The kli hamiyucha livrar litzorich midi bovad. Efshar dena b'chal is livrar b'kli. Right? There's no problem. And then he says another nafkamina could be sometimes people put a little rice into their salt shaker to keep the salt not becoming stuck together and loose. So when I shake out the salt shaker, the rice is staying in. Is that a kli borer? Says Rav Shlomo Zalman. No, maybe not, because it's always used right before you consume. That's his heter. Rav Avadia assumes the salt shaker is for sure mutter, because the whole purpose is not for separating; it's just to keep it to keep the salt very dry. What about a slotted spoon? So the Aruch HaShabbos discusses ein lehishtamesh bekaf mechureres. Aruch HaShabbos says you shouldn't use a slotted spoon. Right, you take out the challah. Let's say you take a slotted spoon, so the liquid goes down. You don't want to serve the liquid; it's going to get all over the plate. So you can use a slotted spoon. That's a kli borer. But what if you're not using it as a kli borer? What if that's the spoon that you have? Right, you're just getting it. You're just taking things out with a slotted spoon. So the post in the Mishnah Brura, I know the seat to say that is mutter because you're not using it for borer. You're just using it as a spoon. It happens to have some slots in it. It wouldn't be a problem, and it could be, we'll have to talk about this more, that there's no concept of psik ratio when it comes to borer. If you're kavana, some malachas, the kavana is part of the definition of the malacha. Like here, you're doing the same exact act, depending on what you want. Good from the bad from the good. So we'll have to talk about that. So we spoke about miyad, we spoke about biyad, and now we speak about the third, ochel mitok psoles. The language of the Gemara in Shabbos Ayin Dalet is, hayu lefanav mine ochlin. You have two foods. The Rabbeinu Hananel quoted there in the Tosfos says, whatever you want is called the ochel. Whatever you don't want is called the psoles. Even though objectively they're both food. Different colored jelly beans, different types of chicken. But what you want is the ochel, and what you don't want is called the psoles. Right? The Rambam allows if they're both food, you can separate them, do whatever you want with them. The Rambam says, without specifying. The Rambam talks about sorting two types of foods for immediate consumption without saying, talking about them, so it seems like he holds it's it's mutter, right? But the Rama adds a hara, and he thinks that adding in a word in the Shulchan Aruch, which basically changes the Shulchan Aruch to reflect Tosfos's shita. Either the Shulchan Aruch holds of that and it just wasn't clear, or even if not, the poskim say, the Bir Halacha says that we should be machmer like the Rama, and that is, again, anything that I want is ochel, anything I don't want is psolas, and therefore always take what I want, and whether it's food, whether it's Borer applies to silverware, or applies to non-food items as well. So that's the discussion of what is ochel and what is psolas. But it has to be a tarov, as we mentioned. It has to be two types. If everything is the same type, you have chocolate chip cookies, some are bigger, some are smaller, that's not a taroves. And therefore, that's not a borer situation. Right? The Shumas Hadeshin says, big and small don't make a difference when it comes to borer. Right? That's all called min achas. That's the Shumas Hadeshin in Siman Nun Zayin, source 32. Chatichos dagim munachim aluach echad. You have pieces of fish that are obakara on a plate. Ubishabas shabalecham and rotzalechem miksasa, and you want to leave some. What should you do? He says, if they're all the same thing, two types of fish is borer. One roasted and one boiled is borer. Anything that changes the quality is going to be borer. But just size, big and small, without changing the quality, that's not going to be an issue of borer. That's the Ramah. And that is what we hold. But the poskim describe, the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShabbos give many examples. Big and small will make a difference if it changes quality, like tablespoons and teaspoons, soup spoons and little spoons, big forks and small forks, where one is always used for fish and one's used for chicken. Obviously, if other types, they're all chicken, but one's roasted and one's baked, and different types of cookies. So all of that would be borer, and therefore ochel and psolas. You have to know what you want is going to be the ochel, and what you don't want is the psolas. We even spoke about matzah. Whole matzahs and broken matzahs, the Shmir Shabbos says, that's a borer situation, because there's a different quality between a whole matzah, which is a shalem, and a broken matzah, which is not. So this is the basics of borer, and B'ez Hashem, next time, when we get into volume number 19, we'll get into some of the lemaisa elements of borer.